Being a pushover is making you miserable. If you're always trying to please other people, if you're trying to avoid conflict, if you are Mr. Nice Guy, smiling all the time, laughing at jokes that you don't find funny, if you're trying to meet other people's needs at the expense of your own and not rock the boat and make other people like you, then mate, I'm just here to tell you, this is probably taking an emotional toll on you. A toll that you may not have noticed until this point, or maybe you have noticed it and you don't know how to break out of it. Well, either way, in this video, mate, I'm taking you on a journey. I'm taking you on a journey of what you can expect, of what starts happening when you stop living for other people, you stop trying to please everyone else, and you start embodying the kind of authenticity, integrity, and unapologetic, bold courage to be yourself that starts gaining the respect, not just from other people, but the respect of the most important person in your life, yourself. Now, how can I talk about this? Why can I talk about this? Two reasons. The first reason is I used to be Mr. Nice Guy. I used to be the most nicest, pleasy, smiley person you would ever meet. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still pretty much that way now, but I've gone on a journey over the past multiple years of integrating what we call sort of my shadow, my darker side, my assertiveness and all that other stuff. So I'm quite a friendly, agreeable person as it is, but I'm no longer letting that run my life. So I'm speaking from personal experience. And the second reason is I've been working as a men's coach now for the last 4 years, which is all about helping men live with more integrity, authenticity, assertiveness, boldness, courage, and finally living a life that they want, not the life they think other people want them to live. So I can speak from experience, not just in my own life, but the lives of my clients as well. Change number one, you start seeking solitude more. When you're Mr. Nice Guy, you take what you can get because deep down you have this wrong belief that you don't deserve anything better. This applies to so many areas of your life. It also applies most strongly to your social life. It's almost like the people that are in your life, most of them you didn't really choose. Most of them just sort of occurred. They sort of slipped into your life through circumstance. But when you start going through this awakening process, when you start dropping the nice guy mask, you start actually noticing how much social interaction tends to exhaust you. Certain people tire you out. You end up noticing, I'm actually an emotional punching bag most of the time. You start realizing just how much energy it's costing to be nice, to wear this nice guy mask all the time. So when you start going through the awakening process, you take the mask off and you're like, you know what? I actually prefer to be alone, because you stop prioritizing the validation and approval of everyone else, and you start prioritizing your inner peace. And you start realizing that solitude is where you get it the most, because when you're alone, you can truly be yourself. Now, you're not quite at the stage yet where you can bring your authentic self out with the world so you can feel just as calm and at peace around other people than you are alone. You might still make excuses, you might fake illnesses, you might tell people you've got some family thing going on so you can't attend stuff, but this is okay. It's perfectly normal. It's just a phase that you're currently going through. And change number two, you start asking yourself what you want, and you actually start listening for the answer. When you are full-blown Mr. Nice Guy, you don't know what you want. This is because your whole identity throughout life has been built around what other people want from you. If your identity, if your ego, let's say, could speak, it would say, I don't want anything. I only want what other people want from me. So there's no wonder then why one day you might wake up and find that you're living a life that doesn't feel like yours anymore. You're living a life where you need pornography, you need video games, you need to doom scroll, you need Netflix, you need maybe comfort eating. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, because the core fundamental reason for all this stuff is the same. This whole life, you need to distract yourself from it just to get through it, because your life isn't your life. Your life is just up for grabs from anyone else who wants a piece of it. All your life, you've been trying to do the right thing. You've been trying to be a good person. And you've tried to not be selfish, like maybe your dad was, or maybe those asshole bullies at school. You've tried to be the opposite of all the bad things that you've seen in the people that caused you pain. But what's this led to? I understand why you've done it, I understand why I did it, but this leads to quiet desperation. It leads to a kind of silent suffering. Now, I suspect that if you cleared away all the distractions in one day, all the stuff that you use to numb yourself out and avoid, then you might be faced with a couple of painful truths, mate. You don't like yourself, that might be one of them, and you don't like your life. That might be how you feel. Now, at this stage, it might feel like a bit of an abyss, like you've slipped into an abyss, because that's literally what's happened. But it's necessary for your evolution, because when you clear away all the distractions and you sit with yourself, it's like an unraveling. It's the unraveling of this false self. You're not Mr. Nice Guy. That's a childhood survival strategy. But when you clear away all the distractions, you start realizing that that's not who you are. Now, your true self is bursting through, and your true self is not content with survival. It's not content to just survive this life. The childhood survival strategy, the nice guy mask, was all about survival. Your true self doesn't give a shit about survival. Your true self wants to thrive. That's why the question, what do I want, it starts coming up in this stage. You start realizing that this question, just asking this question is not selfish. It never actually was selfish. This question is the doorway to your awakening, to the life that you love. What do I want? Change number 3, your healthy anger starts to awaken. Men who are too nice all have one thing in common. I don't get angry. I never seem to get angry. Nothing really bothers me. I don't let things bother me. The problem with that is that anger is a healthy emotion. See, a lot of us nice guys, we tend to associate or equate anger immediately with violence in a kind of binary on-off, all or nothing mentality. Anger doesn't necessarily mean violence. So we try not to be violent or aggressive, so we stuff our anger away as well. But anger exists to protect your boundaries. It exists to protect your values. It exists to protect your self-respect from people who would step all over it. And those people, man, are everywhere. You must have realized that by now. But without healthy anger, without this healthy anger, you are essentially defenseless. You're like a city in the Middle Ages, in, I don't know, let's say in the Middle East or something. And you have no walls. You also have no guards. You have no weapons. So people can just walk in and take what they want. But that's not the only problem that comes up when you repress anger. You see, anger is such a deep and primal emotion, and there's a lot of energy wound up in there. Okay, so when you repress anger, it takes a vast amount of energy to do that. And if you've been doing this for so long, you don't even realize the emotional toll that it's taking on you. It's like you're forcing a door closed in a house, and there's a bunch of demons and beasts and monsters that are trying to get through the door, and you're forcing it shut. But you've been doing that since you were a kid. And then you wonder why, which is what nice guys often run into, depression is a thing. You wonder why you don't have any motivation to make anything happen. You wonder why you look at the world and you're like, what's the point? Because you're knackered, because you're tired, because your whole life you've been pushing away anger. But what happens is, when a nice guy starts making the shift, you start realizing that anger is healthy, you start embracing it, then you start realizing that when you start letting go of all this, the energy that you've been using to suppress anger starts being freed up. You start feeling this sense of relief in your nervous system. You're like, oh my God, I'm no longer fighting anger anymore. I've got energy now to do other things. You start noticing motivation coming back. But not only this, man, you start noticing yourself getting annoyed. You start noticing yourself getting frustrated. You start noticing that when people are actually saying things that bother you, people are doing things that bother you. And previously you were stuffing all that away, but now you're actually starting to be like, no, I'm not actually cool with that. You might even start noticing yourself getting pissed off or little bouts of rage coming up. All this is perfectly normal because no longer are you avoiding anger, you're starting to integrate it. And maybe you don't act on it yet, and that's also okay. Because what's essentially happening now is the inner civil war is coming to an end. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're embracing yourself. You're accepting and starting to love yourself, even with the anger. Change number 4, your body language starts to transform. Here's the thing. We are always announcing who we are through our body language. When you're a nice guy, you smile all the time. It doesn't matter how you feel, but you're just smiling permanently. It doesn't matter how you feel. It's like a painful smile sometimes. People often pick up on that it's not actually authentic, but because that's your default mode, you just smile no matter what, in public, to anyone, in any situation. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You avoid eye contact like you owe it money. You shrink yourself in public. Your shoulders are hunched. If you sat down, your feet and your legs are kind of closed in. You know, your head's kind of hunched. It's like you're in public, but you're trying to take up as little space as humanly possible. Why? Because your nervous system and your brain, you've been conditioned to think of yourself as a prey animal, okay? You're like a mouse that's avoiding a cat. That's pretty much what animalistically is happening. But when you stop living to please other people and you start living in service of yourself, which is not selfish, and I'll keep saying that, you stop being prey. You realize that you deserve to be here. You deserve respect. Just as much as anyone else's, all right? Just as much as anyone else does. And your body language starts reflecting that. You start walking with more intention. Instead of hurrying around everywhere, scuttling about, you're walking, you're stepping with intention. You start standing tall. Your eyes relax into the moment instead of darting around like an absolute madman. You start taking up space more without apology, without this kind of feeling that, I'm sorry. Which is another thing you stop doing. You stop apologizing for everything, by the way. You stop feeling ashamed of yourself, and that shows. Change number 5, you start saying what you mean. Now, this is a really harsh truth I'm about to tell you right now. Nice guys are dishonest and manipulative. Not because they're bad people, but it's because they're afraid to be real. And as I said earlier, it's not because they're bad, it's not because you're bad, it's not because I'm bad, it's because this is a childhood coping strategy. If your parents were abusive, emotionally distant, emotionally inconsistent, didn't meet your needs, it was painful to feel things. It was painful to have strong emotions. If you were bullied in school, well, depending on the circumstances, you had to not feel so much to cope, to get through it. You were being forced to go to this fucking strange institution every day to be bullied. Parents weren't listening to you. Teachers weren't listening to you. Other people weren't looking out for you. You were alone in there. So why would you feel things? Why would you be emotional? You had to cope. You had to survive. Of course you did. Okay? But the problem is with this, with being nice, with trying to take up as little space as possible, is it's the opposite of what works as an adult. As an adult, it just maintains this sort of low self-worth. It maintains this emotional pain, maintains this low self-esteem. You don't ask for what you want. You don't ask for what you need. You show up inauthentically because you're afraid to be real, because being real in the past caused you pain. But when you stop being nice, when you start healing, right? When you start healing the boy in your mind who still thinks it's scary to be real, this is what starts to happen. You start expressing your true interests, no matter how nerdy they are. I'm into Warhammer. Bet you didn't realise that if you've known me for a while. I love Warhammer, Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40k. I used to paint the models. I'm expressing that now. I started expressing that years ago. You'll start doing the same thing. Weird, geeky things that you hide from everybody. You start showing up and you start unapologetically expressing that to people. If someone disrespects you or someone says something you didn't like, instead of stuffing it down and stewing in resentment about it for days on end, you express it in the moment. You say, hey man, I'm not too keen on what you just said. I don't like that. You start asking for what you really want instead of expecting people to read your mind. All this is because you stop tying your self-worth to the approval of other people. Your self-worth starts being rooted in something way more valuable and way more important, which is your truth, your authenticity, your self-respect. Because mate, at the end of your life, what really matters? Did you live a life that others expected of you? Or did you live a life that was true to you? Because I guarantee, mate, when we're all on our deathbed, that's one of the questions we're going to ask ourselves. So if you, mate, are ready to drop the nice guy mask and start stepping boldly, unapologetically, courageously into your true self in your life, then I'm currently accepting a small number of one-to-one clients. I only got I'm not bullshitting, by the way. I only have a couple more spaces. So click the link in the pinned comment down below, go to the page, look at all of it. If it looks good to you, let's book a call and talk about it, okay? See you in the next video, brother. Stay courageous.